Recently, there's been a ton of great games being announced from many different genres and developers, and while we move into the platinum age of gaming through the rise of indie developers and the fall of greedy AAA companies, I've decided to take a step back and explore 10 demos from a few fantastic upcoming games that are still yet to be released. All the demos that I played in this video are completely free to play on Steam, so if you're interested, I would definitely suggest going to support the developers yourself. And as you should know, everything I play in this video is not representative of the final products. Every game is subject to change, so don't treat these as the final releases, but they're still pretty damn good. Our first game is Total Chaos. The game starts you out on a ship in the middle of the ocean during a thunderstorm as you begin to hallucinate. We then awake on the shore of a nearby island that we need to make our way through. The first thing I notice is just how polished the overall feel and look of the game is. The movement is smooth, none of that sluggish or slimy movement that you usually get in cheap horror games. And everything is rather good looking with the way the lighting and volumetrics hit. You really feel the dirt, grime and darkness around you. Now as for gameplay, I'm getting real Resident Evil vibes with a lot of the looting and crafting and with the exploration and especially some of the puzzles that you need to solve. I will say the looting could be refined a lot. The thing with Resident Evil's crafting and looting is there's only a small number of pickups that you need to focus on. Gunpowder, herbs and scraps, and that's about it. But here I was getting all sorts of food items and all different sorts of objects that I couldn't clearly figure out what they did specifically rather than a list of stats. So I think simplifying that system might be a huge plus. And then there's the enemies, which are very basic, just slow moving, easy to dodge grunts. And their whole AI and presence definitely needs a touch up. But for the demo, it feels like a really polished Resident Evil-esque horror game that has a great concept and feel. Next, we have Bloodthief, an incredibly fluid and innovative movement slasher. Now I've been following Blogis, the developer, for almost 2 years now, and from his devlogs, it's clear he's very passionate about his project. Every video he discusses the intent behind every single one of his mechanics, map elements and processes, and really ensures that no part of the game feels flawed in any way. And it really works. And every level is fantastically designed and fluid to move through. Every element is easily presented to the player and I almost never got stuck. The best thing for the game that it also utilizes very well is the encouragement for speedrunning. I just love the concept of speedrunning and it's naturally formed itself into my playstyle in every game I play. And as a big fan of movement shooters, this game is a love letter to players like me, but it doesn't come easily. To get good at this game is hard. You have to practice your slides, learn how to properly conserve your momentum, and properly use your weapon abilities in tandem with one another. Usually for games like this, they're either too challenging or too easy, but Bloodthief is perfectly mixed in the middle with the perfect ratio of challenge and skill, really making that feeling of learning and improvement that much sweeter. Cairn is a punishing yet satisfying climbing game that expects you to take your time with it. And I like that. I'm not going to beat around the bush, it is all just about climbing a mountain to its highest possible point, sort of like Celeste if it played like Death Stranding, but that's not to take away from it. The climbing mechanics are incredibly innovative and smooth, relying on the player actually thinking about each of their movements for each arm and leg one after the other. Every single placement is incredibly important, and every once in a while you need to take a break or place a piton to gain your stamina and stability back. There are also health, hunger, thirst and other survival-esque mechanics to keep track on, but they're pretty easy to stay on top of and weren't that much of an importance for the demo. Plus, I think they make everything a lot more interesting. Again, yes, it does play very slow. If you ain't into all that, this probably won't be for you. But as a Death Stranding and DayZ fan, delayed gratification is my jam, baby. This is the shit I'm into. The game really allows the player to take in the surroundings much more often, which is great because of how gorgeous the graphics and art style of the game is. I expect the story to play more into the game than it did in the demo, and I'm expecting it will be quite emotion filled, so I'm excited to see what they do with it. Then Road to Vostock, which is a very stalkerish, single-player Tarkov-like, but in Finland. First, I would like to mention that this is all from a single guy. He even switched his whole project from Unity to Godot halfway through, so it's clear he's pretty passionate about this project. Again, it's a single player extraction shooter, and it's really well made, all things considered. A big problem I have with a lot of realistic shooters like this is having too many complex keybinds and mechanics to learn, but I didn't feel lost or overstimulated once trying to learn this game. Although there are many complex mechanics with the crafting, attachments, weapon rising, gun loading, etc., they feel rather simple and easy to wrap your head around once you get it down for the first time. There's almost zero mucking about, which I have to praise the game for. As for gameplay, the guns are insanely fun to use. Unfortunately, there isn't too many in the current demo, but I hope further down the road we get a lot more variety without making the game feel bloated. Looting, extracting, transitioning, and every other small feature and mechanic in the game is always extremely well fit into the gameplay loop. And once you learn where most of the loot spawns and the AI like to patrol, it's quite simple to build a routine for every venture out of your hideout. And as for AI, this is where the game is at two ends of the spectrum. First of all, they're smart. They follow gunshots very well and seem to have a decent sense of a primitive routine. Single enemies are easy enough to deal with, but even two can cause some trouble, which is good. The player actually has to be decisive and plan out their courses of attacks. But on the other hand, they're almost dead silent. Unless they're within 5 meters of the player, you can't hear a peep out of them. Maybe having some louder footsteps would be great, but the biggest thing is giving them voices like Scavs do in Tarkov. And luckily, the dev is one step ahead, having already developed that for the newer versions of the game. And from what I see, the game is heading in a fantastic direction. If you're a fan of any of the Stalker games, or even Tarkov, this is definitely one that I would recommend. And now I play this game quite a bit in my free time, and I will be keeping up with the progress. Our next game is Fathom. It reminds me a lot of the Fears to Fathom games, and it's not just because of the similar names. The whole premise is a truck full of videotapes were pulled up off the coast of Japan, and it's our job to go through them. I only spent about 15 to 20 minutes with each of the games that I played in this video, so I only managed to get partly through, but it was super interesting. We play as a lone submarine captain in the middle of the ocean, and what immediately caught my attention was the interactivity of everything. You can press whatever buttons you find, read whatever notes or papers that you find, and everything is just completely immersive. We're tasked by our talking computer to set sail to a new coordinate, and I was rather confused and completely lost trying to work out the GPS and controlling the throttle and whatnot, but it was mostly just because I was stupid and not the game's fault at all. With the vibe and gameplay, the game also reminds me a lot like Iron Lung or Voyager 19, but once we finally got on the move and reach our destination, the computer now tells me that we're out of fuel and I need to go and get some. So, leaving the submarine, we get to explore an underwater town inhabited by giant fish out to get me. And this whole part was really cool. I had to search every house for little fuel tanks while my oxygen slowly gave out, and luckily I managed to make it back inside just in time. It was as if you made Subnautica 100 times spookier than it already was. The deepness of the ocean is one of my biggest fears, and Fathom really plays into that unknown, while also creating a complex and immersive ecosystem for you to explore. Cleanfall is quite unlike anything I've ever played, and I can only really relate it to being close to other games that I'm familiar with. The closest would probably be Noita, but that's only due to the 2D side view and downward caving progression, and the complex interactions with your items, weapons, and enemies. But yeah, it's really nothing like Noita. It's a roguelike that throws you right into an unknown world and every moment surprises you with something new, and it's unbelievable how much stuff is actually in this game. It mainly focuses around your weapon, which can either mine weak materials and earth, or be charged to work as sort of a jet booster to jump higher. And then there are the insanely diverse amount of weapons, tools, and utility that you can collect and use to help traverse your way through the many different biomes and stages, or attack tough enemies that are in your way. There are also a number of wacky and mysterious NPCs that you can find throughout your travels that mostly just sprinkle slight hints at the lore, which I could feel was probably very deep, but I was so lost throughout my time playing. Not in like a confusing, messy type of way, but more so in an intriguing, let me hit up the wiki type of way. It was as if you took Terraria, Noita, and Hollow Knight, and rolled the dice to decide which pieces of each formula you were going to take. But that's only probably because I'm so lost, I'm trying to relate it to any 2D side-scroller I can think of. If I took my time, I might have understood more rather than just nodding my head and moving on to the next thing. But the complexity and randomness really plays into the game's strengths, and it's just really intriguing. Next, we have Crimson Capes. It's the most Dark Souls-like, Souls-like game that I've ever played, and also the prettiest. I love deep and colourful pixel art like this. The Kingdom games are very similar, and man, I just love it so much. But like I said, very Dark Souls coded in the combat, and timing your attacks and dodges to sneak in a heal and hitting whatever Elden Ring magic weapon this shit is, but also very different in a lot of ways. The combat feels more in tune to a fencing simulator, where you need to read your enemy even more for parry trades, and the addition of a feint mechanic makes your attack faking and movement deception much more important to play into. And this feels fun, and does make it unique. But where it lacks is the absence of a stamina bar, which forces a lot of encounters to be more about how well you can mash your buttons within the right timings, rather than every move and button press you make feel important and intentional. And as for the enemies, they don't feel all too unique. Some are weaker, some are stronger, but at least there are archers, right? But moving past there are different items that you can find and equip that add different buffs and effects, which is admittedly pretty cool and does deepen the gameplay, but a lot of the items just blend together. This game isn't really one for me, but I had a good time playing it. There are clearly a lot of refinements to be made, but it's still a fun time. Solar Raiders is a third-person roguelike that likes to think it focuses on movement, but drops the ball in a lot of ways. First up, it is very fun. The art style is cool and gives off a sort of Ghost Runner mixed with Returnal type of vibe. The gunplay was something I wasn't much of a fan of at first, but after some time with it, it felt very snappy and really synergized with a lot of the enemy types and their projectile attacks. But where I have my most complaints is with the movement. Very Returnal-ish, but it didn't work well with the levels and enemies in the game. The dash and sliding are rather underwhelming, only due to the fact that your momentum doesn't transfer at all. In most other games, and especially roguelikes, I wouldn't normally have an issue with this, but with how this game plays and with what I expected around the levels and enemies, I was rather disappointed I couldn't get to do more cooler and stylish things with it. I love speed games. Going fast is my jam, but I felt held back. My other nitpicks are the enemy shields seem rather useless. They didn't feel like they added much to the gameplay and really acted as a fun block. And also the boss at the end of stage 1 is really interesting in its attacks, but was way too spongy. I hate enemies and bosses that just act as a draining HP bar rather than having interesting ways to tackle them, and that's all it felt like. Again, I would like to mention that everything I talk about in this video are all subject to change and are not the final product, and Solar Raiders has a lot to be improved on. Does it do anything too unique for the genre? Not really, but it's still a pretty fun game to add to the roster if these are your type of things. Voidbreaker is one that I'm most hyped for release. Movement, fast-paced shooting, this is my shit. It's basically if the finals became a roguelike and plays very similarly. Similarly. There are Half-Life-esque physics with picking up and throwing all matter of objects around you. It's all very fun, very chaotic, and very harsh. The demo only limits you to the pistol and assault rifle, but it's fine. The weapons aren't too different to anything you've seen before, apart from the fact that they talk to you. During your runs, you can pick up many different upgrades and boosts to insert or slot into your gun, and it's a pretty interesting feature. Other than the simple damage upgrades, reload speed boost, or crit chance increases, you can have some slots activate others or add repeat triggers vertically or horizontally, and it goes pretty deep. It's very similar to the wands in Noita. As for the enemies, they aren't all too unique, providing either simple grunts to chase after you or airborne ones shooting projectiles and small explosive ones. But with the number of different types and having them all spawning diversely all at once really makes the game quite harsh, and I had to lock in many occasions because they're pretty tough if you ain't moving fast enough. And the movement is where this game shines. It's either the most satisfying thing you've ever felt or the least satisfying. It's the definition of easy to learn but hard to master because of how well momentum carries over through your slides and dashes, but also how easy it is to lose all your speed on one misplaced rock. Also, just look at how good this game looks. And next is Constance. Honestly, I don't really have much notes about this game, and I can sum most of it up by just calling it a very feminine Hollow Knight. However, it's much deeper than that. There are a lot of cool mechanics that expand it as a Metroidvania, and I always see a heap of Hollow Knight clones that tend to reuse and recycle many mechanics and systems from it, and end up being very shallow. But Constance doesn't. With the vibe and lore about artistry and especially paint, they implement some pretty interesting features with your attacks and dash, and especially with the stab mechanic on void objects. And honestly, up to this point I was 4 hours deep with all the games that I played, so I didn't write many notes for this title, but it's a very polished, fun and casual Metroidvania. And as a little bonus just for you at the end of the video, we have Megabonk. Yet another roguelike, I know, but this one is very cool. It perfectly combines Vampire Survivors and Risk of Rain 2 into something quite spectacular. The whole game loop, progression, combat, weapons, and abilities from Vampire Survivors with the exploration, movement, stage progression, and items of Risk of Rain is never something I could have guessed would be something. But as two of my favorite games, it's quite a welcome experience. It's really hard to talk about this game because of how much it parallels between the two that it's sourcing. But every addition and feature implemented somehow really works well together. As for characters, in the demo we have the Wizard Fox, the Knight, the skateboard riding skeleton, Giga Chad, and the cowboy robot. Now when playing Vampire Survivors, a lot of the game is just waiting around and mindlessly killing enemies, and all of that is in this game. But with the Risk of Rain exploration element of grinding cash and opening chests for items while hitting shrines and looking for the teleporter around, there's never a dull moment, and every second feels like you're pushing towards something bigger. The movement is one of those things where it should feel bad, but it doesn't for this type of game. It's floaty and slidey, but once you get used to it, you can abuse it and even hit a bunny hop type thing if you get good. The enemies are quite diverse, although basic, but after the time is finished counting down, the game gets rough. The builds that you can make with your weapons and tome combinations, along with items you get from chests and the basic stat boost through your run, can get incredibly deep and complex, and I just pray that for the release to add Vampire Survivor weapon evolutions. The demo is quite basic with the fact that our character selection is quite limited and we don't have access to all the items and equipment, and hell, we can only play one level. But it is still one of the best and cooler games that I've played in recent memories. And that's it. 10 demos from games I would recommend you check out for yourself. All of these games have passionate developers behind them, and I'm sure they would love it if you play their games, so definitely go do that. Who knows, you might find your new favorite. Other than that, also yes, I am still sick for this video and my throat is still rough, but other than that, like and subscribe. This was a bigger video than I expected. I didn't think it would take this long to get through them all, but here we are. If you're interested in hearing about me talk about more games, please go check out my second channel. At the end of every month I go over all the games that I played for that month, and they're pretty good.